She never thought her entire life would fit into a single trash bag. One cold night, after years of enduring insults, she was shoved out of her own home with nothing but a suitcase and a crumpled $50 bill thrown at her like pocket change. To him, it was the final humiliation, a way of saying she was worth no more than scraps. But fate has a way of turning insults into weapons. Because that same $50 meant to crush her would become the key to something extraordinary, something worth $10 million. And when he came crawling back, the real battle began. Naomi had been married to Charles for nearly 7 years. On the outside, their lives looked stable. He worked as a mid-level manager, and she juggled part-time jobs while taking care of their small rented apartment. But behind closed doors, the truth was far darker. Charles never missed an opportunity to belittle her. He mocked her dreams, insulted her background, and constantly reminded her that she was lucky he had married her at all. Naomi was black, from a working-class family, while Charles's relatives made no secret of their disdain. They saw her as a burden, someone beneath their son, and Charles absorbed their prejudice until it poisoned their marriage. The final, breaking point came one rainy evening. Naomi returned from her shift at a diner, exhausted, only to find her belongings stuffed into garbage bags by the door. Charles sneered, tossing a $50 bill at her feet as though she were nothing more than a beggar. "That's all you're worth," his eyes seemed to say. For hours, she wandered, clutching that bill, trying to make sense of what had just happened. In her mind, she replayed every insult, every look of disgust from his family, every time she had swallowed her pain just to keep the peace. That night, something inside her shifted. She took shelter in a small convenience store, her heart heavy, when her eyes landed on a bright lottery sign. It was ridiculous, a waste of money, yet something compelled her. She bought a single ticket with that same $50 bill, the one meant to humiliate her. Little did she know that reckless choice would change everything. The next morning, Naomi barely remembered buying the ticket. She tucked it into her purse and focused on finding a place to stay. A friend offered her a couch, and she spent the following days trying to piece together her life, balancing despair with a sliver of determination. When the winning numbers were announced, Naomi almost didn't check. But when she finally unfolded her ticket, her hands trembled. One number matched, then another, and another. By the time she read the final digit, tears blurred her vision. She had just won $10 million. Shock quickly turned into disbelief. $10 million. From the same $50 meant to degrade her. She laughed, cried, and collapsed onto the floor, overwhelmed by the irony. For the first time in years, she felt powerful. Naomi's life transformed almost overnight. She hired a lawyer, set up a trust, and quietly relocated to a safer neighborhood. She invested wisely, determined not to let greed or recklessness steal her blessing. Slowly, she began to heal, surrounding herself with people who valued her worth, people who didn't. See her skin color as a flaw, but as a story of resilience. But news spreads quickly, and when Charles found out, his arrogance returned with a new face, entitlement. He tracked her down, showing up unannounced, suddenly claiming he had always believed in her and demanding his share. His family, once cruel and dismissive, now insisted that Naomi owed them, arguing that the marriage had been a partnership. Naomi was stunned. The very people who mocked her, who pushed her out into the rain with nothing, now wanted to share in her triumph. Their audacity burned like acid. What hurt most wasn't the greed itself. It was the hypocrisy. For years, they had dismissed her as worthless. Now in their eyes, she was valuable only because of her wealth. And in their twisted logic, they believed she should be grateful to them for ever being part of her life. The pressure mounted. Charles threatened legal action. His relatives whispered lies to anyone who would listen, trying to smear her name. And though Naomi had every resource to fight them, the emotional toll weighed heavily. She hadn't asked for this war. All she wanted was peace. But peace never comes easy when injustice refuses to die quietly. The courtroom was packed the day Charles dragged Naomi into a legal battle. His argument was simple. He claimed the money was marital property, even though he had abandoned her before the ticket was purchased. His lawyer painted him as a supportive husband, conveniently ignoring the years of cruelty and racial prejudice that had defined their marriage. Naomi sat silently, her hands folded, listening to the lies. Each word felt like another attempt to erase her pain, to rewrite her story. But then her lawyer stood and revealed the evidence: bank records, text messages, witness accounts, all proving that Charles had expelled her from their home before the winning ticket was ever bought. The $50 wasn't a gift of support. It was an insult, a dismissal. When the judge asked Naomi if she had anything to add, she rose slowly. The room hushed. With quiet strength, she explained how Charles had humiliated her, how his family's prejudice had crushed her spirit, and how that single $50 bill had been thrown at her as though she were trash. But that same bill, she said, her voice steady, became the seed of my freedom. He never intended it to lift me, only to tear me down. And now he wants to claim the very thing he tried to destroy me with. The silence that followed was thick with discomfort. Even those who once sneered at her shifted uneasily. The judge's ruling was clear. The winnings were Naomi's alone. Charles would leave with nothing, just as he had once left her. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, eager for a soundbite. Naomi ignored them, her children clutching her hands as she walked past the flashing cameras. This victory wasn't about money. It was about dignity. She didn't spend her fortune on luxury or revenge. Instead, Naomi built scholarships for young women of color, opened community centers, and invested in projects that uplifted voices like hers, voices that had been silenced for too long. She turned humiliation into empowerment, not just for herself, but for others who had been told they were worthless. And Charles? He faded into obscurity, left with only bitterness and the haunting realization that greed cannot rewrite the past. His family, once so vocal, disappeared into silence. Naomi, however, stood taller than ever. She knew money didn't erase scars, but it gave her the platform to heal, to fight back against prejudice, and to inspire others to believe in their worth even when the world tried to crush it. Her story became more than a headline. It became a symbol, proof that strength often grows from pain and that dignity is priceless. As she looked out at the life she had rebuilt, one thought stayed with her. Sometimes the very stone thrown to break you becomes the foundation of your greatest victory. And for everyone who heard her story, one question remained: how many lives are forever changed, not by what was given to them, but by what was once denied?